Hi, this is Erin from Blossy Bee. Welcome to my channel. The plan for this video is to test two bird moulds using AR400 Eco Casting Compound in 3 different colourways. Spoiler alert, I just wasn't feeling the love after demoulding them, so then began a journey of over 2 months. 30 separate film sessions, multiple failed techniques, and more than 3 hours of footage that needed editing down to try and save them. Anxiety, depression, sickness, family responsibilities, stress, and a complete creative block made completing this video a Herculean task. I really hope you enjoy it and perhaps learn from my mistakes. When I first purchased these two moulds, I was hoping that they were actually penguins. I have someone that I really wanted to make some little penguin figurines for, and I thought the best way of checking is to just quickly cast them with Eco Casting Powder, and then I know within an hour what they're going to look like. And so I mixed up the AR400. It's a 3:1 ratio of the Eco Casting Compound powder just with tap water. And after mixing it together thoroughly, I just poured it into the moulds, set it aside, and as I said, an hour later, let's see what we have. One of the best things about using this AR400 Eco Casting Compound from Harry and Wilma in Australia is that any little overpour or spill just literally rubs off. It's just beautiful. So even though you can demould it less than an hour after pouring, you do need to wait a couple of days for it to reach its full strength. Not the couple of months that I ended up giving it. I guess I've made it super strong in all of that time. So I'm really happy with these. They turned out beautifully, no bubbles that I can see there, and they are a very cute bird. They're not a penguin, but they're very cute birds. Next step is to weigh them so I know how much to prepare for the next batch. And this time I'm going to try and blend 3 different colours together. I'm going to be blending a yellow, a mulberry pink, and then a Tuscan sun, which is an orangey gold colour. And really the mulberry pink takes over, but you watch, you'll see. I pour the mixture into 2 cups, so I've got a better control over having each of the birds a similar pattern, and add in the drops of the mixture. And then I do what I would call a dirty marbling, and that's just sort of giving it a bit of a squiggle, blending it together a little bit and just pouring it straight in. So again, another hour later, it is time to now demould these ones. And I can already see through the mould that they are definitely more pink than anything, but they do have that tiny little tinge of almost like an apricot colour to them as well. And yeah, I just don't like the way the colouring's turned out at all. It's very blotchy, and it's lighter on the bottom half of each of the birds and just patchy, and really not happy at all. So I mix up my third batch, and this time I'm using the same sort of colours but less of the pink in this one, and just seeing if I can get a more even blend all the way through by using the 1 cup. So just trying to switch things up a little bit to see if I can improve the outcome as I go. And time to demould these, and the same thing happened again. I'm not sure what I have done. I'm just disappointed. They are very uneven looking, very patchy, very blotchy. I didn't deliberately throw that, by the way. I do like the colour of this one, the almost sunset colours mixing together, but yeah, they're not what I was looking for. So I basically just set them aside to cure, and then different things were happening. My mother needed some support and ended up moving into a nursing home, unfortunately, and I got influenza A, and it just went on and on. Lots of things happening. So they just sat there for weeks and weeks and weeks until finally I thought I really need to do something about these. I'd also during this time just lost any hope of any creativity. There was just nothing. So I was really struggling. I thought, first of all, I'm going to try some acrylic paint. And so I sat the little bird on top of a cup so that I could actually get down low, and I started painting this paint on. And as you can see, it was just an immediate disaster. It didn't provide coverage, and I didn't feel that even if I did 3 or 4 layers, it was never going to sit properly. I haven't sealed the birds or anything, and I just absolutely intensely disliked it. So over to the sink, gave that a quick wash and a scrub, and ditched that idea promptly. My next brainwave involved using a gesso, a thick white paint. I thought that that would give me a much better chance of a full coverage, and so I got a little paintbrush and just started painting all over, and it did definitely cover up the colour much better than that other paint, but I could see the brush strokes and it didn't look very even or anything. But I thought, look, I'll commit to doing 2 coats and we'll see how it goes. And then for some reason I decided not to just simply paint the other one as well in the hope that it would work, but that I would get some leafing size, which is a tacky glue, and I would paint this one, and it takes it round about 30 to 40 minutes to reach the correct level of tack. And my idea was that I was going to gild this one. Honestly, looking back at this now, this is the most scattergun approach to finishing off items I've ever really seen. Okay, so just to reinforce that, I now go and get some DecoArt wax. It's called DuraClear Cream Wax, and it's the first time I've ever used it. It's a new bottle. And so I popped some pink pigment powder into a little cup and add in some of the the cream wax, and then just blend that together. I notice as soon as I start mixing the two together, it goes extremely pale. So that's just an observation. And for some strange reason, I seem to have mixed all my birds up now, so they're all getting a different sort of a treatment, aren't they? And then using a paintbrush, I apply this to one of the birds, and I actually think this technique had some merit. When I first applied it with the paintbrush, It was a little bit patchy, but then when I started applying it with my hands and smoothing it around like you would a normal wax, and I'm so sorry I keep going off the screen here, it felt really good and it was looking pretty good as well. So I've set that aside there to dry. So now I've got, from right to left, the wax with the pigment powder, the gesso paint, and then I've got the leaf gilding tacky gel or glue, and just waiting to do the gilding on that one. Now these flakes are called Cosmic Shimmer. They're Gilding Flakes, and they're very unusual compared to ones I see at other times, because they not only have the gold, they have that coppery colour, and they also have little pieces of green and flecks of purples and reds and all sorts of colours in there. And you'll see that more clearly as I go on with these. So all I'm doing is I'm just using this soft dry brush, and I'm getting the flakes onto the bird, whether it's by using the brush or my fingers or a combination, and then I'm just burnishing them onto that surface, the tacky surface, with the brush, and it's going pretty well. It's an unusual look because of the different colours, but that was the look I was going for. I wanted it to look quite old and interesting, and that sort of ancient patina to it. And yeah, so I pretty much got the whole thing covered very quickly and easily, which was good, and then set that aside to dry so I could assess the coverage afterwards. Now here's where I go wrong with the wax, the cream wax finish. I should have just buffed that first layer. Instead, I go and put on a very thick second layer, and it started building up in almost a crusty sort of a form, and it's not a good look. Now this one, I decide I'm going to test out whether I can use Posca pens. And I've primed the pen and am just trying to cover it all over. It definitely goes on nicely, but I can fairly quickly see it is quite streaky. Anyway, I keep going because I think at least then I will know what happens when you use Posca markers on AR400 items. So look at my hands. Should have had gloves. Oh dear. Anyway, by this time I've got several disasters sort of bubbling away around me, and you know, it's starting to get difficult to choose which disaster to look at next. So after giving my hands a good wash, I decide to turn my attention to the pink monstrosity. That is the mica powder and cream wax mixture. And I get a piece of paper towel to try and give it a quick buff. Nothing happened. Then I take a very mild abrasive pad. Again, nothing. By now, that second layer has dried into awful ridges and bumps, and I know it's just not going to work. So I take that over to the sink and I give it a really good scrub in some hot water. You wouldn't believe how many times some of these birds have been denuded of their treatment and given a light sand again and sent back to play in the, I don't know, the devil's playground of my workspace. And despite the fact that I can see that the white paint is looking very blotchy, I decided to give it another coat because who knows? You know, third time could be the charm. And yeah, so give that a really good coat all over. Don't feel like I've got anything to lose at this point. Okay, next task. Observe the Posca pen, and you can see that one is a no, very clearly showing you there with a wave of my finger, just no. So that goes over to the kitchen sink as well for a nice old scrub and a light sand. Okay, so now I can start to see where another issue pops up, and that is that I start mixing up some of my birds, and you'll see what I mean towards the end. So now I'm going to apply some of the leaf gilding glue to another bird because so far that's really the only treatment that I've enjoyed the outcome of. And so I'm going to just give that a nice coat. I think I went a little bit heavy, but it did work out okay. So I leave that aside for about 30 to 40 minutes till it reaches the right level of tackiness. Now, if you're wondering what that cheeky little move there was, that's just me reusing the little pedestal from the first white painted bird. And for some reason, buoyed on by the real almost failure of the first one, I decided to do a second one. Yes. No idea why. I know what I end up doing with them, and I guess it was making sense at the time. But here we go. So I'm painting over this bird. I no longer know which treatments this bird had previously been through, what it's suffered beforehand. But now it is getting a lovely, nice, thick coat of white paint. After assuring myself that the correct level of tackiness has indeed been achieved with this bird, I then start gilding this one, and similar to the last time, just getting the little pieces of the metallic foils on there any way I can, and then rubbing them over with the brush and burnishing them in. And you'll see probably in this one there's a little bit more of the different colours coming through, and it really does give quite an unusual appearance rather than just having all gold, all silver, or all of that copper colour. After a quick cleanup, I then give the last bird another coat of the white paint. And now it's time for me to have a look at the two original birds, the ones that I left that beautiful pure white with the eco casting powder. And these two, I've decided to use these henna-like tattoos, and I find some patterns that I think would look pretty, and I'm looking at the moment for some symmetry. I would like to decorate the wings with a similar piece on each wing but reversed. And so all I do is I cut out the pieces, I take off the plastic coating, press them on to the piece, and then dampen it down with some water. And then as it's reached the point that it's ready, it just sort of starts jiggling and it'll come off. I use a lot of temporary tattoos when I'm creating items, and I love the variety that you can get and the different looks that you can get. And I'm also always keen to see if there are parts of the temporary tattoo designs that I can shape or cut out or trim to suit my needs more. So I very rarely just use pieces that are there, I often tend to just trim little bits off or add bits on and things like that. So don't be afraid of doing that. And now I want to have this floral piece across the front of each of the birds. And whenever you're applying a temporary tattoo onto a hard curved surface, you are going to have some issues. And there's a couple of ways of handling this. You could actually cut into the paper some little lines so that you can actually flex that paper over the shape, or you can just go ahead and do it as normal, but knowing there might be a couple of little pieces that you need to trim off. By that, I just mean that you might have some finer details over some of the curves that don't quite adhere the same as everything else. And all you need to do is either take a fingernail or just a craft blade and ease those little pieces of the temporary tattoo away from the surface or reshape them. And that's a really effective way of dealing with it. Because the temporary tattoo process uses water, just set those aside to dry thoroughly. Okay, now I am going to try and tackle the last pair of birds, except they're not a pair. They're one of each of the coloured paws, and this starts becoming quite a big problem. But what I decide to do is use a pencil and just outline a shape. And then I'm going to use these markers. Now, they are by KaiserCraft, and they just say that they're watercolour-like, and they have quite a lovely brush. And all I'm doing is I've chosen two colours, a pinky colour and an orangey colour. And I'm going over the surface and just making sure I want to get a more consistent colour, because this blotchiness is really disappointing. And I'm going to do this one. I won't do the other one on camera because it is exactly the same process, but they did take some time, because I found that you would go over and over and trying to get a really nice even coverage. Look how pretty this orange is though. I just love this. This sort of a saffron colour is one of my favourite colours. I just think it's so vibrant, and particularly when it's paired with a nice hot pink, it looks gorgeous. Anyway, I'll fast forward through this because I just keep going and going and going and hoping that I get a really decent coverage and that I can achieve a similar look in the other one. Unfortunately, I was disappointed because the smaller one, the one on the right, had a much darker mottling, and it's because they're from two different coloured paws. So even though I've used the same colours over the top of them, the original pigment has influenced how they look. I thought I'd use a white Posca pen to just put some cute little dots all around where the two colours have met, and you'll see wherever I made a bit of a boo-boo, I would just go in with my pens and cover them up. That's the great thing about Posca markers. You can cover them up and go over the top of them as well. All right, now I'm using Mod Podge now to apply to the base of each of the birds, because I'm going to seal them all with epoxy resin. And I don't want the epoxy resin to drip down and pull underneath them and leave an unsightly bump. So I'm just going through applying with a paintbrush, some of this Mod Podge to the bottom. You can also use liquid latex or PVA glue. If it's a more regular shape, you can use masking tape or stickers, anything to just protect that base. And just to speed up the process, I'm just going to pop my hairdryer onto them for a couple of minutes and then they'll be ready to go. I've mixed up a batch of River Art resin, just a teeny little batch, and I'm just going to use my gloved hands and fingers to apply a little bit over each of the pieces. And look, after all the time I've spent on these to get them finished, and probably the ones with the tattoos I just thought looked the cleanest and probably the most stylish. Unfortunately, as soon as the resin hit the tattoo, it loosened some of the ink in the temporary tattoo, and so all of a sudden there was this staining and smudging. I was so disappointed. Anyway, I've kept going, so I've done the two with the tattoos. Now I'm doing the pair with the Gilding Flakes. And then lastly, I'm doing the pair that I have used the markers and the Posca pen to decorate. And so I'm just going to set these aside to allow that resin to cure overnight, and then we'll see what we ended up with. After peeling off the Mod Podge from the base of them, they are ready to be photographed, and here they are. Thank you so much for letting me share this little crafting journey with you. It's quite therapeutic actually to be able to do that, and I look forward to reading any of the comments, any suggestions, feedback, improvements for next time. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.